Hello, hello. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi everyone,
Hello.
and welcome back to Poems with Friends,
Episode 5.
episode 5. Episode 5. I'm Megha,
And I'm Anurag.
and this is Poems with Friends where we read a poem and try to feel something.
Yes.
So today is a special episode because we are doing a poem by one of our viewers, Churmurji.
Hello, Churmurji.
Thank you for the suggestion. And we will be doing Poem Without Metaphor by Matthew Buckley Smith. So let's get into it. Let's read it. Poem Without Metaphors by Matthew Buckley Smith.
Some days there are no other words for pain, and for the worst, the literal is best. The rain against the glass is only rain. Your heart is just a muscle in your chest. The book ends in a bookish sort of way. The moonlight stands for nothing but the moon. Your children carry half your DNA and will inherit all your savings soon. Somewhere, a car is racing through the night, no faster than a moving car. A brace of deer glance up at something bright, gone still, exactly like the deer they are. And as for you, you could be anyone who's done, who's said the things you have said and done.
Nice. Actually, this hit me more now that you have read it aloud because first time I read it just to see the suggestion, like the poem that he had suggested, I just glanced at it and I read it. But now that you have read it aloud, it felt it hit me much more. I think because the sound of it is such a big part of the poem, right? Which I couldn't hear when I was reading it inside my head.
Agree, and I think this is the first poem in our podcast series where meter and rhyme is actually a thing.
Right,
Like
right,
the poet actually has followed the classical rules. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think
Of-
this is. Sorry.
I think this is AB,
A B
AB, CD, CD, EF,
E F E F
and GG.
G G.
And the meter is also perfect. Like some days there are no other words for pain, and for the worst, the literal is best. The rain against the glass is only rain. Your heart is just a muscle in your chest.
I think just for our viewers, what he means when he says meter is the line length or the number of syllables in a line. So, for example, the amount of time that it takes to say some days there are no other words for pain, it's almost the same as the amount of time that it takes to say the rain against the glass is only rain.
And it's also the pattern. Like if you see some days, and then it's and for the rain.
Right.
So it's also like the like sing-songiness of the lines are very similar.
It's almost like a song actually.
Which is very surprising for a poem without metaphors. Like
So this is a poem without metaphors but with rhyme.
So-
Something has to. That's actually a very good point because I was also thinking that something has to work for a poem, right? We have been talking so much about metaphors in our last poems that we have done. In fact, the first poem, if you remember, the birthday cake poem, that whole poem was just a big, huge metaphor, right? And whenever we read a poem, we focus more on the image and the metaphor, and that's what people generally say makes a good poem. So I was curious to see even with the poem title, when I saw poem without metaphors, that if there are no metaphors, then what is it that's working for the poem? So I think one thing that's definitely working for the poem is the sound of it, and I think this is something that I was also recently reading in a book about poetry analysis, that we focus a lot on metaphor and images, but if you see poets who have matured a lot and have grown with their work, more and more they move away from metaphor and image, not like move away from it completely, but move away from it as a very
primary thing.
yes, and move towards sound and other things like sound and diction. Diction also, we talked about how people's personalities come into the poem. So I think this really works in a sound kind of way. It resonates in your head, right?
agree, and I think that is why I love it. Like
You love
I love the
video
pattern, I love the meters, I love the
Yeah.
structure, and like that is why I love Vikram Seth. Like he is very strict about how he writes
Right,
it.
right.
His poems are simple, but they are very rememberable. Like I can,
They're like a song in your head. They'll get
correct.
stuck.
Like
No, that makes sense. You personally really love meter and rhyme, right?
correct. So when I read it, I was like, wow, this was a good poem to start. So I am already biased towards this poem, by the way. So, but,
Okay.
so what else? Do
I
we
think
want to?
the first time when I read it, since I didn't hear the beautiful sound of it, what I thought was again, actually there's this amazing book that I keep quoting that people who are interested to read. It's called Real Sophistication by Tony Hoagland. And somehow I think since we are doing this podcast, somehow I read something in it that connects back to the poem that we are reading. So I read a line in it which actually talked about poems that are self-conscious about being poems. So this is a very good example of poems being self-conscious about being poems. And there was a line in which he says that such poems are like radioactive experiments, in the sense that they can create some very useful genetic mutations, but they can also create like some monstrous anomalies.
When you say monstrous anomaly, is it what does it
In the
mean?
sense that if it's a very risky thing for a poem to be self-conscious about being a poem, because it can fail miserably also. It will just sound like some dry intellectual thing and will not be enjoyable at all as a poem. So I think that's what I thought about when I read this, that it doesn't fail. Of course it doesn't fail at all. It really works, because for me, I think one takeaway for me from this poem was, of course there are no metaphors, but there are no like really images that guide you in, but there is a kind of, a kind of message or takeaway from it which made me think of identity. And what does it, the poem is basically saying that there are no other words for pain. Like it's basically saying that, oh, we generally call this is like that, that is like that, but what happens when we stop using so many words for things and we just say that, oh, somewhere a car is racing through no faster than us, it's just a car. So it made me think of identity and how we also use words to identify ourselves, and we keep putting judgment and we keep putting our view of things, like our perception on things. For example, tube light is not so beautiful, but moonlight is beautiful, and metaphor is just that, right? It is like a coloring of the world of how I see it. I might see a puddle on the road as extremely disgusting piece of goo, or I might see it as a placid lake which reflects the moon. So I am constantly like assigning extra meanings
to
right.
it, and but where did your point take it? Like, as in, this is one part of it. Like, but I
mean,
sense a but.
No, I think it's because I was recent. We have been talking about identity crisis so much, right? So I completely jumped into it because so much of us have been having identity crisis. Like our friends, everyone is having identity crisis these days. In fact, my point was coming. I'll actually go back to the source of the point, which is all of the identity crisis conversations. Even another friend of mine visited that day, and she was also having an identity crisis. And I was outside in my balcony at night, and there was this like beautiful moonlight, and there was a banana tree, and there was a shadow of the banana tree on the ground, and the shadow was shaking in the wind, and it was looking like extremely eerie and beautiful. You know how a shadow shakes in the wind and it feels eerie because how can the wind touch a shadow? Something feels like that. And I instantly got a feeling of taking a photo of that, because I make illustrations. So I thought, oh, I should take a photo. And then I questioned myself that why do I have to take photos of everything? Why do I have to now that I'm creating art professionally, why do I have to create art out of every fucking thing? And then I realized that the process of creating art, or even of write illustration, photo, or making a poem out of something. For example, sometimes when you feel something, you also feel the urge to write a poem about it. If you're being too serious about writing poetry, right? And when you do that, you kind of make that thing a part of your identity. So when you take a photo, you say that, oh, this is what I saw, you know.
Okay, this is what I perceived as
Yes,
beautiful, as
exactly,
special in
right.
all my
This
days.
is what I perceived and how I perceived it. So now it's a part of my identity because I took this photo or I made this illustration. And when you make a metaphor or you make a poem out of something, then you also say that see, this is how I saw the world and this is my identity.
But what?
You're not convinced.
I am not convinced because I feel the poet is creating an imagery. Like, poet is not comparing it to other things, poet is not doing all that, but I can see the poet going about his life very painfully. Like, it's not a.
Yes.
To me, what I felt was, to be honest, and this is a personal experience, so that is why I could relate a lot to it, that I do not usually write poetry. It's not something I do, but when I'm feeling very emotional about something, very out of control, I just decide that I have to write a poem and distance my emotions in the poem from me, and that works really well. So when I look at the poem, like, some days there are no other words for pain, the first line immediately connected me to that experience, that the poet is used to having a lot of emotions and writing poems, but today he started writing the poem and he just could not bear it. Like, his usual emotion, his usual pain makes him write poem, but today he was very restless. He's looking at everything and he's like, this is not it, this is not it, this is not it, but like, he's inherently a poet. He's writing it in meter, he's thinking still in that way. So I just really liked, like, the meta of how it came about, like he's still thinking about it. Like, he is trying to distance himself from this emotion by comparing his previous emotions. I wrote poem,
What you're saying is that you really related to the fact of this is a person who is trying to write a poem. Like, him writing a poem is
therapeutic for him.
Is
Usually.
therapeutic, and he it's like it's something that is there. He has to write a poem. Why or what of it is not. He has to write the poem. So now he's feeling so much pain that he says that, you know, there are no other words. I can't do this. I cannot say that it's like jumping over a railing. There is no other word for it. What I'm feeling right now, language cannot express it. Language just fails to express it. That's an amazing point, because, you know, we connected so much with so different parts of the emotion. Like, you connecting to the failure of language per se. This poem is also about the failure of a language, right? How much language.
But I think he's saying that. Sorry to interrupt, but as in, I just. For example, I feel what he's saying is not that language failed me. What he's saying is that directness is the best way to convey my pain.
Okay.
He's saying by comparing it to other people or other things, I will not, like, I will not give it a, what do you say?
Right.
A justice. Like, for example, how you watch documentaries, right? Like, instead of looking at analysis and how people talk about it, etc., sometimes looking at the raw footage gives you the true goosebumps. Like, on ground reality sometimes can be that.
That's a great point, actually. I never looked at it that way. I was always looking at it like a failure of words or identity, but I think coming back to what we were talking about previously, that assigning meanings to things, we were talking about identity and assigning meanings to things, right? So that's what you're saying, that instead of assigning a meaning which relates to something else, if you see the rawness of it, if you just see it like just the murder, like see the murder happening, don't think about some other, you know, flowery words for it. Just the word murder should be enough to make you feel it. So, you know, just the pain, it's just the pain. There is nothing I can describe it as, because as you said, it won't do justice. I think that makes a lot of sense. It actually brings me back to diction, because what you said beautifully captures the diction of the poet, and I think that's very important to be able to enjoy poetry. in order to like just to imagine the person who is writing the poem, right? So this person is very frustrated, as you said, and they are not. They are like they're very. It's almost an angry poem. The rain against the glass is only rain. Your heart is just a muscle in your chest. Get over yourself. Kind of feeling is there.
And the thing is, it's imagery. Like, to be honest, when I look at your heart is just a muscle in your chest, he is not. He's saying visualize it. Like when I think about it, I look at my NCRT books and where the muscle is literally beating, and that is the image it captures for me. Like there is an imagery
Right.
that I see in the poem. That's it. I have very strong opinions.
That's a very. I completely agree with it that there is imagery here and there. That rain is against the glass is only rain. I mean, there is an image there. It's just that the poet is not putting an extra effort to describe it in another way that generally poems do. But of course, when you read the lines, the rain against the glass is only rain, you can see the rain, and you can see the children who are carrying your DNA, whatever. I think just like you really connected to the first two lines of the poem, I really connected to the last 2 lines of the poem, and that's why I went into the whole identity discussion, because he says, and as for you, you could be anyone who said the things you have said and done. So when I read these lines is when I started thinking about identity. Like he's, again, if we go over it and say that somewhere a car is racing through the night, no faster than a car. A brace of deer gone still, exactly like the deer they are. So deer are just deer, a car is just car, book is just book. And for you could be anyone. These are the lines which made me think of identity, that who are you? Should we say that you are a person of like, you're a beautiful, smart, intelligent person, all the adjectives that we use, or all the metaphors or similes that we use. He is a person who can light the room up with his smile, that is something of a simile that you might find in a poem. So that's why I started thinking about identity, that who are you? You could be anyone who's said the things that you have said and done. That's all. You are not the most perfect, the most intelligent person in the world. You are not the kindest person in the world. I am not using any adjective for you, just like I am not using any adjective for anything else. It is what it is.
Oh, are you saying you is a general you?
Is a general you. You could be, and just like the beer are beer, the deer are deer, the car is a car, the book is a book. Just like that, you could be just you.
Okay, I really read it in a very accusing way. Okay, oh my god, you have done
Something. I think it's also interesting to see even the emotion that both of us read this poem in is quite different. You read it in like a very accusing, raging kind of way, and you were coming from the first paragraph, someone, and you were coming from your own experience of like feeling extremely emotionally full and then going to write something. You're like, there are no other words for it, the rain is only rain. And okay, so we were talking about the last 2 lines. I think the last 2 lines is what got me to identity and questioning it. So for example, if I am purchasing fruits outside and I took the ripest banana and I came back home, so then it is a way of saying that, oh, I am the person who went outside, took the ripest banana and came home. That's all. It's not that, oh, I am the most greedy person in the world because I took the ripest banana, or I am a very cynical person. It is just that.
So what we are saying is that we do not have to assign it to another person. Okay? I can be greedy, but like as in on the other hand, you could be greedy, but I do not have to really assign that meaning.
Right.
I can just focus on the literal part that I am feeling sad, I am feeling disappointed, I am feeling maybe
Yes, this is what I said, this is what I did. If I just start seeing myself as, I actually become a very non-judgmental observer. This reminds me of the point that me and Rohit were discussing that day, that it's very difficult to even non-judgmentally observe yourself or anyone. Whenever you start observing, you start assigning meanings to it. Oh, this person did this, this person did that. So I think, yeah, the last line made me think of all that and identity. But I think it's very interesting that when you read the poem, you read it from when you imagined the poet writing the poem, you imagined him as someone who is overwhelmed with emotions and who wants to write something down. And I imagined him as just, contemplating on something. So I think we should go paragraph by paragraph now and see what we can get more out of it.
You can read it this time.
So some days there are no other words for pain, and for the worst, the literal is the best. The rain, the rain against the glass is only rain. Your heart is just a muscle in your chest. The book ends in a bookish sort of way. The moonlight stands for nothing but the moon. I think, I can actually see more and more of what you are saying now, because it doesn't feel like it's a contemplative poem, especially how it starts, right? If it was contemplative, he would have said maybe that today the clouds were just clouds, but he's starting with pain. So I can see that he's harrowed and he's in pain. So this is a lot of pain here.
And he's very cynical, like as in he is saying that,
right,
like he's saying all the good things in your life are not truly good. There is no, like you are just randomly assigning positive meaning to it. There is no point in that, like, and that,
right,
and that is when kind of the hopelessness comes in, right? You
Right.
start questioning things. You say like I remember, and this is I remember discussing this in therapy. I'm not sure whether it's a point to really put in public or not, but and I remember discussing with the therapist that in a hopelessness, you kind of feel everything is happening around you, but you are not touching it. Like everyone is some distance away from you.
right.
So the heart seems like a heart. Everything seems like, oh, it is going on, and you are just a passive observer of everything.
Right.
You will see people have fun. You will see people doing things, and you will not feel that.
Right. That's a very good point, that the world kind of seems like plastic to you. So that's actually a great point, that these 2-3 paragraphs, even the things that he is choosing to talk about, for example, he's talking about the heart or the moonlight, which are generally things which are used in poems as a cliche for positivity and romance. So he's saying there is no romance. The heart is just a muscle. Stop saying that the heart is full of love. Heart is not full of love. So that actually gives you a lot of hopelessness. So he starts with pain, then he goes into hopelessness, and then he goes, your children carry half your DNA and will inherit all your savings soon.
More hopelessness.
Yeah,
This is okay, he's like, oh, this will continue till my death. Like,
yes. And don't even assign any special meaning to your children. Children are something just carrying your DNA, and that is all yours.
you are earning, you are doing so much toil. Nothing, you are not going to get any pleasure out of your work.
Your children are not pieces of your heart. They are just some carrying your DNA, some biological stuff.
Very depressed.
Very depressed, actually. Okay, awesome. Coming to these 4 lines. These 4 lines are something which are a very strong image in the poem, which is not there before. Like before, there are images, there is rain, there is book. But if we look at these, somewhere a car is racing through the night, no faster than a swiftly moving car. A brace of deer glance up at something bright, gone still exactly like the deer they are. So it is a very incidental image, like it's an incident that he's painting. And we were talking about why did he choose to paint this incident suddenly. I mean, of course it fits in with the theme of not using any metaphors and saying that car is a car, deer is a deer, but why paint that image, right? And I think you gave the point of guilt,
okay, and like connected to the fact that sometimes you want to, like when I read these lines, what I see is that, oh, you have done something wrong, and you have to really say it in very stark terms.
Right,
Okay,
right.
you do not have to say you were a nice person, the deer was a fool, etc., etc. Like it's not a deer's fault. Like you are driving the car, the drive is moving, the car is moving fast, and it hit the deer, and the deer is
Right,
gone.
right. So it seems like, I think, I mean, it's our interpretation. It might be right or wrong, but it seems like the pain, the hopelessness, the cynicism, the talking about death, and then finally, when you're so hopeless and we are talking about death so much, you also come to a point where you start thinking of your past mistakes, right? When you're completely depressed and hopeless, and it happened to me also when I was very depressed a few years ago. I would suddenly start thinking of something random that I said 2 years ago to someone and how it must have hurt them, and this could be the author thinking about something that happened, like in some night that happened and something bad happened, and they, with the hopelessness and the depression, they are putting it into the poem. But again, coming back to the point of not assigning any meaning to anything, they are putting it in very stark terms, as you said. They're putting it very bluntly. So just like we said that the heart is not something very positive, similarly he's not really owning up to the fact that he did something wrong.
Because he never said that who
Right.
is driving the car.
Right.
A car is being driven,
Right.
hits a deer
Right.
as usual.
Right. There's a car. There is no mud. There is no negative connotation to anything. So just like he's avoiding positive connotation, he's also avoiding negative connotation. He's like, for example, we were talking about, if I have 2 McDonald's burgers in the car and there is a homeless person on the street, then I'm not saying that I am a terrible person. I'm just saying, that one night I had 2 burgers in the car and there was a homeless person on the street. I'm just stating off for what it is. You might choose to assign meaning or not. I am just stating things. Right?
Okay, he's absolving himself of any guilt or shame that he has, because he's like, I am not a bad person.
Right.
I just probably hit a deer.
I'm not going to say those in those terms. This is what happened. And it's great that you said he's trying to absolve him of that guilt, because that could also be a trigger for all the pain and the hopelessness that he's feeling.
Okay, so the poem is a way to distance
Right.
like everything, so it becomes very
Right. It's comes back to the point that you said the first time, that when you are overwhelmed with a lot of emotions, you want to distance yourself from them, and then you write a poem. So this is his extreme way of distancing, in which even while writing, he does not want to feel anything. He does not want to feel the positivity of the rain. He does not want to feel the beauty of the moonlight, and he does not want to feel the guilt of what happened that night.
He is in pain, so he cannot feel any good things, but he's like, but bad things are also like, right.
Right.
But
it actually ties back to anhedonia also, depression, right? When you don't want to feel anything, you don't want to do anything. So neither positive nor negative.
I'm a poet. I hope he's doing well.
That is just our backstory.
Our backstory to the poet. It's possible. None of this is true.
We're coming to the last line, and as for you, you could be anyone who said the things you have said and done. I think it nicely ties back to our whole concept of guilt that we have dreamed up of. So he's saying that you could be anyone who has said and things. You don't have to assign yourself any tags or terms or something like that. No?
So nice.
Nice. I think to end it, again saying that this is just our interpretation of this. We've made this backstory about this really depressed person who has done something wrong in life, who is really hopeless. Now who is overwhelmed with emotions. He's sitting down to write a poem, and in that poem he's saying that I don't want to feel anything, neither positive nor negative. But by writing it in that way, he is making us feel all these things.
It is so nice. It was a very
the starkness of it is actually making you feel things. For example, if you would just write the word murder 100 times, the starkness of it would make you feel something more. Okay, this was a great poem. We enjoyed it a lot.
Yes.
And our interpretation of it. It makes it feel so coherent and so much more like it actually makes you feel so much more once you have this discussion and you understand it, right? So
Okay, I think it's a poem that I may go back to in that emotion. Like when I'm feeling hopeless, like
Right,
there are
right,
times when
right.
you go back to a poem and you feel comforted. Someone else felt it. Like
Yeah.
there is that poem of Vikram Seth that 8 lines I've just learned. Like I just throw it at people when I'm like, ugh, life is so terrible.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. This can become one of those poems that you just remember, like that you just learn. And I did not feel it. The best part is that I did not feel so much for this poem when I first read it. Now that we have created this whole backstory and the emotion of the poet himself, now you can actually feel feel it in your gut actually. Awesome. Okay.
Nice.
Let us know, guys, what you thought, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. The rain against the glass is only rain. Heart just muscle in your chest.